The email arrived at 6 in the morning. My position as operations director had just been eliminated. No explanation, no prior warning, nothing. Just a cold corporate message signed by Greg Hamilton, the regional vice president who had tormented me for 2 years. I had closed the biggest logistics contract in company history 3 months earlier. I had restructured the entire supply chain. I had saved them millions. And now, during Pride Month, they were firing me by email. I read the message twice, my hands shaking. Behind me, in our bed, Marcus was still sleeping. He had no idea what was about to happen. The office would open in 3 hours. I needed to go there, face them all, and figure out what had really happened. But deep down, I already knew. Greg had finally found a way to get rid of me, and the reason had nothing to do with my performance. I spent 5 years proving I was competent enough to deserve that position. Every project, every report, every decision was scrutinized twice as hard. Greg made sure everyone knew he preferred someone more traditional to lead the team. His words, not mine. When I got promoted, he stopped speaking to me directly. And when I started dating Marcus, things got infinitely worse. One detail: if you have ever felt judged just for being who you are, or know someone who has gone through this, the story will touch you. Want to follow it to the end. Subscribe and help give voice to stories that should no longer remain silent. My name is Cameron Mitchell, and I am 34 years old. I have worked in logistics for 12 years. Started as an assistant, studied at night, got my MBA while working full-time. Climbed every step without shortcuts. When I joined Redstone Logistics 5 years ago, I knew it would not be easy. The company was old, traditional, full of men who had been there for decades. But I was good at what I did. Very good. Numbers did not lie. My first year there, I reduced operational costs by 18%. Created a tracking system that cut delivery errors in half. Clients started asking specifically for me in negotiations. My boss at the time, Richard, was a fair man. He saw my work and promoted me. That was when Greg Hamilton arrived. He transferred from the Texas office to become regional vice president. From day one, something felt wrong. Greg looked at me differently. Not with respect, not with curiosity, with disdain. He would walk into meetings and ignore me completely. When I presented reports, he interrupted constantly, asked questions he already knew the answers to, made me repeat information 3, 4 times. Other directors noticed. Some felt uncomfortable. Others started imitating his behavior. The comments began subtly. Greg mentioned during a meeting that clients preferred working with someone who projected strength. He said this while looking directly at me. Another time, he told the team that leadership required a firm presence. Again, staring at me. I am not naive. I knew what he meant. My voice is not deep. I do not fit the stereotype of what they consider masculine. I dress well, perhaps too well for their taste. I care about details, and apparently that bothered them. But I kept working. Every contract I closed was a response. Every successful project was proof that their prejudice was worthless. I worked weekends, missed gym sessions, skipped dinners with friends. My entire life became about proving I belonged there. Then I met Marcus. It was at a business conference in Chicago. He owned a tech company specializing in supply chain software. We met at a panel about logistics innovation. He asked an intelligent question about integration systems. I gave a detailed answer. After the panel, he approached me. We talked for 2 hours. He was brilliant, confident, successful, and completely open about who he was. Marcus did not hide. He did not apologize for existing. That fascinated me. We exchanged numbers, started talking every day. 3 months later, he visited me in Seattle. We went to dinner at a restaurant downtown. It was the first time in years I felt genuinely happy. Not just professionally accomplished, but happy as a person. Marcus made me laugh, made me forget about Greg and all the garbage at work, made me feel like I did not need to be someone else to deserve love. But keeping our relationship secret at work became exhausting. I could not mention him in casual conversations. When colleagues talked about their weekend plans with wives and girlfriends, I stayed quiet. Once, someone asked if I was dating anyone. I changed the subject. The lie felt like acid in my throat. Marcus understood. He never pressured me. But I saw the sadness in his eyes when I asked him not to call during work hours, when I refused to post photos of us together, when I invented excuses to avoid company events where I would need to bring a +1. Greg, meanwhile, got worse. He started making comments about my personal life, asked why I never talked about dating anyone, joked that I was married to work. His tone was not friendly. It was investigative, threatening, like he was looking for confirmation of something he already suspected. One afternoon, I was having coffee in the break room with Linda from our. She was kind, one of the few people there who treated me normally. We were talking about a new client when Greg walked in. He poured coffee, turned around, and said that the company valued family men. That clients trusted people with stable, traditional lives. Linda looked uncomfortable. I said nothing. What could I say? That his comment was discriminatory? That he was violating about 15 workplace conduct policies? I needed that job. Needed the salary. Needed the career I had built. So I swallowed my anger and left the room. That night, I told Marcus everything. He listened in silence, his jaw tight. When I finished, he asked if I wanted him to do something. His company had connections. He could make calls. I refused. This was my battle. I would handle it my way. But the pressure kept building. Greg started excluding me from important meetings. Forgot to copy me on crucial emails. Once, I discovered he had presented one of my projects to the board as if it were his idea. When I confronted him privately, he smiled and said I must have a misunderstood. That we were a team. That credit did not matter. I left his office shaking with rage. That weekend, Marcus came to visit. We stayed home, ordered food, watched movies. He held me while I vented about everything. About the exhaustion of hiding. About the fear of losing everything I had worked for. About the humiliation of being treated like I was less than everyone else just because I was gay. Marcus kissed my forehead and said I was the strongest person he knew. That one day, things would change. I wanted to believe him. But at that moment, all I felt was tired. Monday morning, I arrived at the office determined to keep fighting. There was a major contract under negotiation. A national retail chain wanted to restructure their entire distribution system. It was huge. Millions of dollars. Months of work. And I was leading the project. I had spent weeks preparing the proposal, studied every detail of their operation, created solutions no one else had thought of. The presentation was scheduled for Friday. I would fly to their headquarters in Atlanta. This was my chance to prove, once and for all, that I was indispensable. Greg could not touch me if I closed this deal. Wednesday afternoon, called me into his office, said the client had requested someone different for the presentation. Someone with more executive presence. I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. Asked who would present. He said Robert, a director who had joined the company 6 months ago. Robert knew nothing about the project, had not read a single page of the proposal. Greg did not care. He said the decision was final, that I should brief Robert on everything by Thursday. I left his office and went straight to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall. And for the first time in years, I cried at work. Robert presented my project in Atlanta, closed the contract, got a promotion. Meanwhile, I stayed in Seattle, training the team that would implement the solutions I had created. Greg praised Robert in front of everyone, said he was a natural leader, that he had executive instinct. No one mentioned my name. It was as if I had never existed in that project. I thought about quitting, sending my resignation and leaving. But something inside me refused to give up. I had worked too hard to let them destroy, so I kept going. Accepted every humiliation, swallowed every unfair comment, and waited for another opportunity. It came 2 months later. Marcus called me one night, excited. His company had just closed a partnership with a major investment firm. They were planning an aggressive expansion, acquiring logistics companies across the country to integrate them into their software platform. It was a $50 million operation, and Marcus wanted my opinion on which companies would be good targets. We spent hours on video calls. I analyzed financial reports, studied market positioning, identified companies with potential but operational problems, companies that, with the right restructuring, could become extremely profitable. Marcus was impressed with my analysis, said I had a strategic vision few people possessed, asked if I would consider joining his team as a consultant during the acquisition process. I hesitated. Working with Marcus meant mixing personal and professional life, but it also meant freedom. Meant working with someone who valued me, who saw my talent instead of my sexuality. I accepted. Started working nights and weekends on Marcus's project. At Redstone, I kept my routine. No one knew about my involvement with the acquisition plan. Greg continued his campaign of humiliation. Started making comments about my clothes. Said I dressed more for a fashion show than an office. Laughed when I brought salad for lunch instead of burgers like the other men. Small things. Daily things. Things that accumulated like stones in my chest. Then Marcus identified Redstone Logistics as a potential target. The company had good clients but terrible management. Operational costs were high. Internal processes were outdated. With the right leadership and technology integration, it could triple in value. He asked what I thought. My heart raced. This was it. The chance to change everything. I told Marcus that Redstone had potential but would need a complete management overhaul. That some people there were obstacles to progress. He understood what I meant. Asked if I was sure. I said yes. The acquisition process began discreetly. Marcus's lawyers made the initial contact. Redstone's board was interested, but wanted to keep negotiations confidential until everything was finalized. Meanwhile, at the office, Greg escalated his attacks. He started questioning my decisions in front of clients. Once, during a video call with an important customer, he interrupted me to say that perhaps we should have someone more senior handling that account. The client looked confused. I felt my face burn with shame. After the call, I went to our. Filed a formal complaint about Greg's behavior. Linda received me with sympathy but little hope. She said these situations were complicated, that I would need concrete evidence, that Greg was well connected in the company. I left her office knowing nothing would happen. That night, Marcus noticed I was quieter than usual. We were having dinner at his apartment in San Francisco. I had flown down for the weekend. He asked what was wrong. I told him about the complaint, about the feeling that I was fighting a battle I could never win. Marcus held my hand across the table, said that soon, very soon, things would be different. I did not understand what he meant. Not yet. The following week, Redstone's board announced they were in advanced negotiations for the company's sale. The news exploded in the office. Everyone was nervous. Acquisitions meant restructuring, meant layoffs, meant uncertainty. Greg called an emergency meeting, said we needed to stay calm, that our jobs were secure, that the new owners would recognize talent and dedication. He looked directly at me when he said talent. The message was clear. People like me would not survive the transition. I smiled. He had no idea what was coming. Marcus flew to Seattle for the final negotiations. We barely saw each other that week. He spent his days in meetings with lawyers and executives. I spent mine preparing reports and presentations, pretending everything was normal. Friday afternoon, the announcement was made. Redstone Logistics had been acquired by Vertex Solutions, Marcus's company. The transaction was worth $40 to $1 million. The board celebrated. Employees were apprehensive, and Greg looked confident. He probably thought his position was secure, that a new owner would value someone with his experience. Monday morning, Marcus arrived at the office for the first time as owner. He brought his management team, called a general meeting. Everyone gathered in the main conference room. Greg sat in the front row, smiling. I stayed in the back, observing. Marcus began his speech, talked about Vertex's vision, about innovation and efficiency, about valuing real talent. Then he said the company would undergo a complete restructuring, that some positions would be eliminated, others would be created, and that all decisions would be based solely on merit and performance. Greg raised his hand, asked who would lead the restructuring process. Marcus smiled, said he already had someone in mind, someone who knew the company intimately, someone with the strategic vision necessary to take Redstone to the next level. Then he looked directly at me, asked me to come to the front of the room. I felt everyone's eyes on me as I walked between the chairs. My heart was pounding. When I reached the front, Marcus announced that I would be the new Chief Operations Officer, that I would report directly to him, that I would have full authority to restructure teams and processes. The room fell silent. Greg's face lost all color. The rest of that day was chaos. People approached me with questions. Some congratulated me genuinely. Others were clearly trying to secure their positions. I scheduled individual meetings with each director. Needed to understand who actually worked and who just pretended to work. Greg avoided me, left the office early, did not respond to emails. But I knew this conversation was inevitable. The restructuring took 3 months. I worked 16 hours a day, analyzed every contract, every process, every team, identified inefficiencies that had existed for years, found evidence of resources being wasted, of projects that never should have been approved, and discovered something worse. Greg had been manipulating reports, inflating numbers to make his results look better than they were. Some contracts he claimed to have closed were actually negotiated by other people, including me. I took all the evidence to Marcus. He reviewed everything carefully. His expression grew darker with each page. When he finished, he said just one word: unacceptable. My relationship with Marcus was no longer a secret. We did not make a formal announcement, but people figured it out quickly. Some handled it well. Others whispered in corners. I did not care anymore. I was tired of hiding. Tired of pretending to be someone I was not just to make others comfortable. If they had a problem with who I loved, that was their issue, not mine. But the freedom came with a price. The pressure at work intensified. Every decision I made was questioned. People said I only got the position because I was dating the owner, that it was favoritism, that I was not qualified. It hurt. But I had numbers on my side. In 3 months, I reduced operational costs by 22%, renegotiated contracts that were harming the company, implemented systems that increased efficiency across all areas. The results spoke louder than any gossip. Meanwhile, Greg tried to sabotage me. He talked to clients, suggesting the company was unstable under new management. Spread rumors that Vertex was planning to shut down operations in Seattle. Some employees began sending their resumes to other companies. I discovered through Linda, who had become an ally. She showed me emails Greg had sent from his personal account. Evidence of his sabotage campaign. I could have fired him immediately, had grounds and authority, but I wanted him to fall properly, publicly. My relationship with Marcus also began to show cracks. Not because we did not love each other, but because I barely had time for anything beyond work. Canceled dinners, missed weekends together, fell asleep during phone calls. Marcus was patient. He understood I was proving myself, but I saw the frustration in his eyes. One night, after I canceled another trip to San Francisco because of a client crisis, he said we needed to talk. My heart froze. I thought he was going to end things. Instead, Marcus said he was worried about me, that I was working myself to exhaustion, that I did not need to prove anything to anyone anymore. I broke down, told him I was terrified, that any mistake I made would be used as proof that I did not deserve the position, that I was not enough. Marcus held me while I cried, said I was more than enough, that he was proud of me, that we would get through this together. The final blow came during a board meeting. We were discussing the annual results. I presented the numbers, the growth, the savings, the new contracts. Everything was positive. Greg, who still held his vice president position until his formal review, asked to speak. He stood up and said the results were inflated, that I was manipulating data to look good, that the company was actually in worse shape than before the acquisition. I felt rage explode in my chest, but I stayed calm. Asked him to be specific. Greg mentioned 3 contracts, said they were less profitable than reported. I opened my laptop, projected the actual documents on the screen, showed line by line that every number I presented was accurate. Then I did something I had been preparing for weeks. I projected Greg's old reports, showed how he had manipulated data for years, how he had taken credit for other people's work, how he had lied to the board repeatedly. The room fell into absolute silence. Board members looked at each other. Marcus kept his expression neutral, but I knew he was furious. Greg tried to defend himself, said I was lying, that I was inventing things because I had a personal vendetta against him. I projected more documents, emails, messages, testimonies from employees who had been harmed by his behavior, including complaints about discrimination that HR had ignored. Linda had helped me gather everything. When I finished, Greg was pale, sweating. The board president asked him to leave the room. He left without looking at anyone. I never saw him again after that day. 2 weeks later, Greg was formally terminated. For cause. No severance. No recommendations. His reputation in the industry was destroyed. Some of his allies in the company also left. Others apologized and asked for a chance to prove they could change. I gave chances to those who seemed genuine, fired those who were not. It was not revenge. It was justice. The company needed people who valued merit, not prejudice, who saw talent instead of stereotypes, who understood that diversity was not a weakness but a strength. But victory felt empty. I had proven I was competent, had restructured an entire company, had exposed corruption and discrimination. But I was exhausted. My relationship with Marcus was hanging by a thread. I barely slept, barely ate. My body was asking me to stop, and I did not know how. The crisis came on a Tuesday morning. I was in a meeting with potential investors when my vision started to blur. My heart raced. I could not breathe properly. Excused myself and went to the bathroom. Sat on the floor, trying to control my breathing. It was a panic attack, the first of my life. When I finally calmed down, I looked at myself in the mirror. I had dark circles under my eyes, had lost weight, looked 10 years older than I was. I called Marcus, told him I could not do this. He left everything and came to get me, took me home, made me rest, and said something I will never forget. He said my value was not defined by how much I worked, that I did not need to prove anything to anyone, not even to myself, that he loved me for who I was, not for my professional accomplishments, that I needed to learn to love myself that way too. I took a week off, the first in 3 years, slept, read books, walked in the park, reconnected with friends I had neglected, and slowly I started feeling human again. When I returned to work, I did so differently. Set boundaries, delegated tasks, hired a strong team and trusted them to do their work. Stopped trying to control everything. And surprisingly, the company ran better than ever. Meanwhile, the consequences of Greg's exposure continued to unfold. 2 clients he had brought to the company turned out to be involved in fraud schemes. They were using Redstone to launder money through fake contracts. When authorities investigated, they found Greg's name on several suspicious documents. He was called to testify. The investigation revealed he had received kickbacks in exchange for approving inflated contracts. Some of that money should have gone to the company. Greg had stolen from Redstone for years. Federal prosecutors filed charges. Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. Greg tried to negotiate a deal, offered to testify against others involved. But the evidence against him was overwhelming. He was convicted and sentenced to 6 years in prison. His assets were frozen. His reputation was annihilated. I felt no satisfaction hearing the news, just a deep sadness. Sadness for all the time I wasted proving I was good enough. Sadness for all the people who suffered under his management. Sadness for a system that allowed someone like him to thrive for so long while crushing those who were different. But I also felt hope, because things were changing. Slowly, but changing. Redstone, under Vertex's management, became a model of inclusive workplace. We implemented anti-discrimination policies with teeth, created mentorship programs for minorities, opened space for people to be themselves without fear. And our results reflected that. Employee satisfaction increased. Turnover dropped. Productivity grew. Clients noticed the difference. Marcus and I found our balance. We learned to separate work from personal life, to support each other without losing our identities, to celebrate victories together and face challenges as partners. A year after the acquisition, he proposed. We got married in a simple ceremony with close friends and family. No big party. No extravagance. Just two people who loved each other, committing to build a life together. My parents came. They had struggled to accept my sexuality for years, but seeing me happy, successful, loved changed something in them. My mother cried during the ceremony. Afterwards, she hugged me and said she was proud, that she was sorry for taking so long to understand, that she loved me exactly as I was. I cried too. Redstone continued to grow. 2 years after the acquisition, the company was worth 3 times what Marcus had paid. We opened offices in 5 new cities, closed contracts with some of the biggest corporations in the country, and I led it all. Not because I was the owner's husband, but because I was damn good at what I did. The industry recognized that. I received awards, was invited to speak at conferences, became a reference in logistics and operations. But the achievement I was most proud of was something else. It was the young employees who approached me to say I inspired them, that seeing an openly gay man in a leadership position gave them hope, that they felt they could be themselves and still succeed. One of them was Daniel, a junior analyst who joined the team shortly after the restructuring. He was talented but insecure, afraid of not fitting in. I saw myself in him, so I became his mentor, taught him everything I knew, encouraged him to be authentic, to not hide who he was. Daniel flourished, got promoted twice in 2 years, and when he introduced his boyfriend at a company event, no one blinked. That, to me, was victory. Not revenge against Greg, not the professional success, but the knowledge that I had helped create an environment where the next generation would not suffer what I suffered, where they could focus on being excellent at their work instead of wasting energy hiding, pretending, surviving. Greg sent me a letter from prison. I almost did not open it, but curiosity won. In the letter, he did not apologize, did not admit he was wrong. Instead, he blamed me for his downfall, said I destroyed his life out of revenge, that I was vindictive and cruel, that I used my relationship with Marcus to persecute him. I read the letter once, then threw it in the trash. Some people never learn, never accept responsibility for their actions, never understand that the consequences they face are results of their own choices. Greg was one of those people, and I would not waste another second of my life thinking about him. Today, when I look back, I see a winding path, full of pain, yes, but also full of growth. I learned that my value does not depend on others' approval, that being authentic is not weakness, but courage, that love, real love, sustains us in the darkest moments. I learned that success without integrity is empty, that power without compassion is tyranny, and that the best revenge against prejudice is not destruction, but construction. Building something better, creating spaces where everyone can thrive, proving day after day that diversity is not an obstacle, but a strength. I still face prejudice, receive hateful emails, hear whispers at events, but they do not affect me like before, because I know who I am, and I know my worth. Greg tried toadstering me. Instead, he freed me, forced me to stop hiding, to fight for my place, and in doing so, made me stronger than I ever imagined I could be. If I could go back and talk to the Cameron who received that termination email years ago, I would say this. Hold on. It will get better. Not easier, but better. You are stronger than you think. And you deserve every good thing coming your way. If my story inspired you, if you have ever felt diminished or know someone who has, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, we share real stories of overcoming and resistance. And if you have your own story of triumph against prejudice, share it in the comments. Your experience can inspire someone going through a similar situation. Remember, your value is not defined by others' prejudice. Your talent is greater than any barrier they try to put in your way. And sometimes the best revenge is simply being who you are without apologizing. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story, which will be even more impactful.